Dahlias are so beautifully complicated that they can be really hard to paint, but today I want to show you two simplified options on how to paint a dahlia. By the way, I got these dahlias from Garden Suite, that flower farm I belong to, and I went the other day. They just opened their dahlia house, which is a greenhouse filled to the brim with huge, stunning dahlias. I mean, some of the dahlias were taller than I was, and there were so many different varieties and colors, and it was just beautiful. Not to mention, I got to pick flowers with a duck for a bit. Isn't he cute? Grab your watercolors and give them a good spritz. And I want you to mix up a little bit of whatever color you want your dahlia to be. And we're gonna make the center bit by making these little swooping lines that kind of form a bit of a cone. Then we're gonna refill our brush, and around that cone, we're just going to be kind of pressing our brush and making these petal shapes. Refilling our brush again, and then we're gonna go in between those and we're gonna make slightly bigger petals. I know that dahlias are perfect, but these do not need to be perfect. Just fill in between the previous row. Again, I'm gonna do another row around that, filling in between. And that's our first basic dahlia shape. And now on to our second one. And this one is loosely based on the first one. However, it's based on the types that have those more flowy petals. So I'm gonna mix up a slightly different color for this one. I'm gonna start in a very similar way where I'm gonna make kind of that cone shape using those simple strokes that kind of lean in. And I'm gonna make a couple extra strokes at the top just to kind of show the other side of that. And for our first row of petals around that outside center cone, instead of using a full petal shape, I'm actually gonna use the tip of my brush and I'm gonna outline the shapes of petals. And then in between those outline petals, I'm going to fill my brush and I'm going to plop my brush down and make fully filled in petals. However, this one's a little bit looser and freer. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to be kind of swiping my brush and swirling a bit so there's a little bit more movement in them. Then I'm going to refill my brush and I'm going to do another layer of those swoopy petals. And depending on how big you want your dahlia to be, you can add in as many layers as you want. But as I go out further, I'm going to start to alternate between plopping my brush down and having a full petal. And sometimes I'm just going to be making the outline of a petal. I love them already, but I want to add a few extra details, so we need to let it dry or make it dry. Now once it's dry, I'm going to fill my brush with a slightly more concentrated version of whatever color that I used for the dahlia. And I'm just going to add some different streaks onto some of these petals to give them a little bit of texture like they would have on the actual flower. And that's how you make the actual flower part. If you wanted to add in some of the greenery, swoop down for the stalk. And then they often have these bits that kind of branch off. We're going to add in a couple of those and flick a few times to hint to the leaves that are on the tops of the little tiny buds. And if you want to add in any dahlia leaves, the key to these is to plop your brush down and then kind of squidge it back and forth so that you get a bit of that rough texture on the sides because they have those serrated leaves. I honestly don't know what I like better, painting dahlias or being in a greenhouse surrounded by dahlias. Either way, if you've been wanting to paint dahlias, you should try this painting.